that they don't actually understand their code. They come back to it like.
Okay. Over to you.
Well, thanks for having us, for giving our presentation on the C47 project. We've been working on it almost every day and night, especially for the last few years. Jaco and I have prepared a joint presentation, and I tried to find an old picture of Jaco, but I did find one of myself. Here you see me at the University of Twente, where I started my studies in the 70s. It's about the year of 1978. If you look very carefully, because this is the actual photograph, you will see my HP25 in the background, which I loved, until I dropped a piece of a glass of orange juice over it, and that even it wasn't good enough to keep working, unfortunately. I have another one now, of course. I have a whole collection. Jaco is first for the next piece of the presentation. Now we will exchange the roles.
Which button is this? How does it work?
Next one.
This one. Right, I did not find such an old picture there. This is just a rather random shot. We were traveling and all that. It's not that easy to find pictures in, but then it doesn't matter. I am one of the developers for the C47 project. Robbert is our documentarist, and he does a tremendous job of that. Why I'm keeping up this slide is just for this piece. The history of us. Every single person has its own history of where do we come from and where are we going to. Mine started with a 67 as a boy. First one I bought was a 11, which was rather inadequate for me in my engineering studies. So then I upgraded unknowingly to RPL, which I didn't know. I just bought an HP, not a collector at the time. And then I went up to the 42. So that's the direction. The 42 part is the important part here, because where we are on our C47 parts heavily dependent on the user interface and operation of the 42. So anyway, Robbert has he's mentioned his 25 there. He hasn't mentioned his 41, his beloved 41. And then he went mentioned into RPL as well, it seems. I'm not sure how he feels about that.
I bought a second-hand one.
Yeah.
But I loved it as well.
Okay. Our development team, we are developing all over the world. You can see there's a block over America. There seems to, we are all volunteers. It's not an organized group of development. You go there because you like it, but none of the Americans have joined. There's a lot of users though. We've tracked ourselves of our little plastic bezels, and about half of it's going to the Americans. So they like it. They're not contributing in terms of in the open source project that we have. Anyway, right down south there, Paulie is right down there in Tasmania. I'm down in Cape Town. There's a Japanese there, and the rest is up in Europe there. Right, our 47. There's a very nice picture of it. I think Bruce demonstrated one of his earlier DM42s that he has there, and I'm glad to see that there was a C47 bezel on his DM42. It's nice to see the project. This has been it's been a labor of love, really. We are all volunteers. It's not a business. It's an enthusiast game, and getting that bezel that far. That's the third iteration that was successful. We started out with wanting nice metal plates. That's a dream that didn't work out. It's extremely expensive to produce, not mass produce, but produce high quality paintwork on metal. So that was abandoned, and so that's the bezel part. The software part is a constant job. We've been on about 5 years. It's open source, community developed. I wanna stand still with a community developed. Those of you that might be on the SwissMicros forum will know that we are not irresponsibly open, but we're open to suggestions and open to good progress, and we have implemented various functions that were not considered even because of comments and suggestions and requests coming. So it really is a community project, and we also see ourselves, as the previous slide you could see, it's a worldwide community. We see ourselves as enthusiasts that also do development. So I mean, we're making these calculators because of one simple reason, because there's not one model that does it. So we're basically making it ourselves. And we do find a lot of support, and of course it seems like our own histories, which I've indicated from where we're coming from in terms of HP, plays a role, because it resonates with users, and we like that. Right, fine. I'd like Robert to carry on with this.
I can explain this, especially because I noticed that a lot of advertising materials, brochures, things like that, they mention, look at this new calculator, it has over 500 functions. And it's a calculator, so why didn't you count it at least? So we did. You know, we will go into the documentation of the calculator, which is my job. But one of the things that the documentation allows us to do is to specifically count the different types of objects we have in the calculator. Mm-hmm. It's too small for you to read, but we have 444 commands. Commands are things, are operations not on the stack, but on objects elsewhere. Maybe a register, increase a counter in a register, things like that, or change something else. We have also 527 functions. So not more than 500 or even almost 600, but 527. And we have 170 menus. That's quite overwhelming, perhaps, but still, you will see how that works out. And also, we have 205 settings. And some of our colleagues, you could say, make fun of that sometimes, because we are extremely customizable. But I think we like it, and it's also sometimes because some request is coming in from, I don't like this default situation. Make it changeable, make it user modifiable, and we do, if it's reasonable. But that's still a lot, I will say that. And of course we have a calculator, because another thing that comes up a lot is what's the relevance of a calculator these days, especially maybe the somewhat younger generation will ask. And one of the things is that, of course, the love we all share for these devices, yes, that stems from the 70s maybe, because these were the first digital gadgets you could buy anyway. There was nothing else, and that love never dies. But also, everything that you can have nowadays is maybe it's in new hardware, even the SwissMicros hardware it may be new, but the software running on it is not really new anymore. And it's not really taking advantage of the new possibilities of the hardware. And I think our calculator does. So it does. It's hard to think of anything it can do. So that's the summary of this sheet. We are still improving it, of course, because we find bugs, we find problems, especially things like the TVM calculators. They are not so trivial. So we were busy, in fact, today in looking at that again. But we have a lot of other things, and we are still improving. And it will never be finished. And that's a good thing, because it's more than a job. It's more than work, it's a passion.
Yeah. Next one, mine.
I think so.
Yeah. Right. I touched on this a little bit earlier on. Our histories. Where do we come from? What do we draw on? How did we get to what the C47 is? Let's stick with the name first. See, why 47? Because we looked at all the HP numbers and we found that was an unused number, and that is literally the next. And we had to move on from the 43 concept, because we were literally, our functionality expanded so much that we are not compatible or comparable really with the previously defined 43 paradigm really. So what is the next? Let's call it, what's the next prime? And we're actually at the 47. So that's why it's 47. But I listed the influences or the look. There's a lot of influences that come from the 25, the 29. I haven't listed all of them. In fact, all of them are there. But I've listed the ones that had significant identifiable influences on you. And the reason I'm listing that is the next question is this one. Ask yourself, what would HP have done with RPM in 2024? That's a very intriguing question, really, because HP doesn't exist in terms of calculators anymore, a long time, but they have had extremely good ideas in getting us all to love the old HP stuff. But now there's new hardware, and you can buy a new HP compatible really in SwissMicros. You can buy various types, and I'm not talking about the M42, which is really a continuation of the 342 paradigm, which is a continuation of the HP42S paradigm. So it's actually just repeating the same, the last thoughts that HP might have had. So this in the 47 paradigm that we have is essentially constructing something that pleases me, that pleases him, that pleases even the public that are buying these things on the SwissMicros forums. We are willing to make changes. We're willing to make it better. So that's an intriguing question, and I think I've answered it the way I did. Yes, we can improve in the same spirit of what that HP had, and that's what we're trying to do. Look at my very dirty, I spoke with Andrew earlier on, that's my very dirty 42S. You treat it with gloves, not because it's dirty, but because it's flimsy, because you press too many buttons too soon, it will actually die. I don't use it for that reason, because I don't want it to die. So I have 3 other DM42s which I can use, and if one dies, one of them is dead at the moment because of battery depletion, but anyway, that's a different thing. Our gold standard that we in terms of user interface has been the HP. For Walter with the WP43S definition, the original one before it became WP43, expanded these menus into the 3. I'm going to call it a 3-line menu, or 3-dimensional almost. It's not really dimensional, but these 3. The menu structure is something that comes from the WP43 and from Walter's original specification, and that works very well. It works extremely well. The multi-level pages that you can get. So that's not something that we intended to change coming from the 43S complete system that we basically took over and then started expanding it. But our operation in terms of the menus, the menu layouts, even the solver operation and the integrator operation over there, which is in the advanced menu, and various things that you can find that. Our main influence is on user interface is 42S, and where we took over the 43S complete system, where that didn't suit us, where that wasn't close enough to the operational efficiency that you can get from the 42S, we changed it. We changed it back to be like that. We changed and improved the base operation of the 42S in a very, very grand base menu, which emulates the 16C, and it's not emulating that in a full user interface compatibility. You cannot do that. You don't have the same buttons. You don't have the primary buttons the way they should. So it's a bit of a compromise. But the spirit, I mentioned spirit earlier on. What would HP have done with the SwissMicros layout or the button layout? That is the kind of thing that we're trying to do. So we're trying to encapsulate the spirit of the original 16C into what you can do, and you can do a lot more. And you can count those functions that Robbert was counting there. And one of the things that are extremely, the 15C started sporting complex operations. Very, very usefully so. The 42S took that into a number type. So you have one object on the stack which is a full complex number. That's a paradigm shift. That is something that changed the scenery for complex operations. So even though 15C might be more attractive for some other reasons because of the horizontal layout, the complex object which is indicated over there, we've taken that into the C47. We reimagined what would be more useful than what the 42S could give you, and I call that the I evolution, the I Evo. So we have really looked at how that could be more useful for especially engineers. I've got an engineering background, so first-hand knowledge of what I want to achieve with this, and what the 28C couldn't give me, and what the 15C couldn't give me, and what the 42S couldn't give me. So that's in there. So those are the kind of things that we drew inspirations of, and I want to reiterate the word of the 42 has been our gold standard. Anyway, I think I've mentioned a lot about that. First of all, taking over the 43S system, the first thing that we had to deal with was the swapped over keyboard, which is not compliant with the 42 and the Pioneer, the whole of the Pioneer family. So that had to be moved over there. So taking over the 43S system, one of the biggest things that I had to do was to rearrange this whole thing, and that was not trivial. It's not just a matter of flipping or mirroring to the other side. There's a lot of internal operations that had to be done, and in fact, the frank truth about that, if for the original 43S specification did not have this awkward layout on the left-hand side, I would probably never have started this project, which started out as the 43C, which was a modification from the S because of the operator location, then moved on to the 43, and then moved on to the 47. So I think the project would have been a dead start if it wasn't for the fact that me personally wasn't happy with this, with a flip over screen. Flip over keyboard. So that's just a bit of history. It is a major inspiration, and that's why it's coming into the presentation, because I have to share that's been a project starter really. So other inspirations are optics. What does it look like? Do you just use the first old font that you get on Word to make your characters? No. We've got a rich history, and I've tried to list them over here. We've got a rich history of HP using that particular font. Now, if you look at the 35S, which I also have, which sits in my calculator box unused, I don't like the looks of it. I don't like the operation of it. I don't like the user interface, and I definitely don't like the fonts. So that's one of the things that I didn't want to replicate. Carry on, you're looking at the 15C, that's a beautiful piece of kit. That is something that whoever was responsible at HP for that look, I mean 15C, it's in the same family of the 16C and 11C. I mean, I think that was all done as a single. I'm not singular. It's not like trying to say that 13C is better than its contemporaries. It's not. It's that whole family that was a real looker. So I have when we started doing our fonts, strongly drew on the 15C. Anyway, look at the others. Look at even the DM42. Those funny fonts that they have. It's their choice. It's their, you know. I'm not knocking anybody for using fonts, but I can say to you why I chose our fonts. Anyway, so that's a physical appearance of the 42S, but the layout, and because that's been in the DM42, you have to have had that. And then of course the things you have a choice over is where do you like your inspiration to come from? There's some enlargements that you can see where it comes from, and more importantly, where is it going to? So we have recently started our second calculator body that we are planning to do. It's been in the process, and it's been a bit secretive, but you know, you can't say everything that you're busy with because of complications in terms of the contractual arrangements that one has to make around it. But one thing we can say is our intention is still very strongly that we will have a calculator that you can physically buy, that's original, that's not a retrofit, that's not stickers, that this is the way that you'll be able to buy. Of course, what is debatable is whether the circles around, you know, whether the actual print will look the same like this. But the layout is 99% fixed. Maybe I'm actually shortchanging it there. It's maybe 99.99% fixed. We're very happy with the R47 look, and we're very happy with our fonts, and we're very happy with our things. We can't really commit to a date. We are in talks, that we can say. We've already been in talks since about a year ago, and things are looking good to have one of these in our hands. Our C47 will remain a retrofit because there's no need to change. There's no need to change any of the buttons. This is a mature layout now. We're happy. We've ordered a large quantity of those bezels, so they are available. Sales are continuing on that. We are considering an application that's been in our thoughts for a while. It is not a trivial thing to convert your software into an app. That is also true. Essentially, we are a volunteer. You know, we are a couple of volunteer scientist, engineer types, IT types. So if there's anybody wanting to join to convert it to an app, that's the job ad for you.
That's the question.
You're
Would
not
the app be like an app version of the R47?
Yes.
It would be like a
Yes.
A47.
Yes.
iOS.
Yes.
Android. Okay.
But the point is, I don't have anybody to build that. So if you can build that, the application forms are in my suitcase over here. So
Okay.
no, I'm just joking about the application forms. It's an open source project.
Sure.
So therefore, if there's capable people wanting to do that, that's something that's not in the pipeline. I don't have anybody to build it. Don't know how
I'm
to
very
build it
interested
myself.
in emulators, so I mean, for me, this is the future of
Yes.
preserving all these
Exactly.
machines.
Exactly.
That's my
And that
that's
is
my talk last year.
that is the intention of using it. However, more than a question mark, I can't give you because. So yeah, that's where we're going to. I mentioned some points here before I sign off on that. These two units that we have. Do we have one of those?
Well, yes,
I've got
C and with me.
Yeah.
Do you have a hardware prototype?
Well, it's based on Walter's WP43, and we put stickers on some of the keys,
Okay.
and also a sticker as a background. But it gives a good impression.
Yeah.
We can show it later.
I can actually just have
You
mine
can put it
out.
up. Yeah.
Remember, this one has stickers.
Okay,
Because
sure.
it's a demo,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
because
of course.
we haven't got. So there's
I like
mine.
the fonts. Yeah.
There's mine.
Nice.
It runs.
Fonts are very
It runs literally the same set of software. We're making it purposely like that because it's less maintenance, it's less development. So it's the synergy of actually having just a different front end on that DM42 hardware. So literally the software has an internal setting telling it run as a R47 or run as a C47. And I think it was Andrew's talk where it came up about the 27 about the Pioneer that can possibly be manipulated or tricked into being a different unit. That's the kind of thing we intentionally do here, because probably they did the same in those years, because it's less development.
Yeah.
If you can actually just get the machine to identify as something else, then you save a lot of development into separate products. So identical software, and we have, because of that, we have the perfect synergy, because everything else is the same. So I think, that goes the wrong way.
You go the wrong way.
Got it
Next
wrong.
is mine.
Next one is yours.
Yes. Thanks.
Yes.
If you go back
Sorry?
to the previous picture, the R47,
Yeah.
it's got the 3 levels of shift functions.
Yeah.
Michael's prototype C43s actually had blue and yellow edges to tell you which key to push to get which of the 3 levels of the shifted functions.
No, he's talking about.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
About the
Over
yellow,
there.
yellow and
Have you removed that? Have you
Yes.
decided not to
Yeah,
bother
we
with it?
didn't like that.
Oh,
this one hasn't.
it has it, yes. I absolutely loved it because I knew immediately which were the 2 keys to push to get the shifted functions. But you don't like it.
No, well,
I didn't particularly like that. I think it's something that in my opinion, it's something that you, once you know it, it's not
Once you know
necessary
it, you
anymore.
know it. Okay,
And once you press the shift key once,
yes.
and our lines, remember we have these default lines. You press the shift key once, it shows you a line, it underlines the correct level.
Oh, right, okay.
On the LCD, you press it again, which goes to the G level. It underlines the higher one, and on the R47, you press the F. It does the same. It underlines the F layer or level, and G, the blue one, does the same thing.
So the underline does it, so you don't need the blues.
That is one of the reasons why in our talks in making a hardware model, who wants to see it? Oh, no, that's it. In our talks that we are having, we are literally discuss that as a topic point. Do we want to continue this, because this was actually part of the idea or the DNA of another model, which is the WP43 and Walters, and I don't particularly see the need of pointing the attention to where the 2 color levels would be.
also
so
it's more difficult to produce.
Yeah,
Yes,
that,
yes.
that,
But
is,
that's
that,
not
that was
best
another fact. That's also correct. So that's an interesting question, because it points to an active discussion that we had. That do you want that, or do you
Yes.
not want that? So our considered opinion was not to want it.
Yes.
And did you also consider what HP worked on?
No, actually on that one I haven't. But
It's
in the
evolution
ethos
of
of
yes.
HP's work, just as you're describing. It's evolving what HP did. HP had keyboard wars where they discussed, fought over which key does what. Now you've got the shift function, the shift and the underline wars as well.
That's a complication.
An evolution from HP.
It's interesting what you're saying, because, for instance, just last month we had a keyboard war in our team when we tried to exchange these two, the DRG and the execute button on the R47, because of a suggestion in the forum, and a few of us were positive about it. Let's just try it and see how it feels. And we have others in the team who are adamantly opposed, and even were emotional about it. So this is not neutral territory. This is very charged.
So how did you arrive at that arrangement? DRG at the top and he executes underneath the
Well,
enter.
you ask me why? How did you decide?
How did you make this compromise?
This is the result of a long discussion in itself, but we had a suggestion to change this, and we wanted to try it. We did try it, in fact, but we turned it back to what we have. In fact, to say we don't change it, we keep it as it is.
Okay.
Yeah. But this is not a neutral territory. We have a lot of discussions, and how do you do these discussions is the question. By the way, the answer about the underline, showing what is the active line of the menu that you are using, that's switchable. You can switch it off if you don't like that. And that's one of the 200 settings.
So it's an option?
Yes, it's an option, yes.
So
Seems to work okay, actually.
It works
Just
okay,
having
but
played
there
it.
are people who don't like it. Well, switch it off. And that is described, of course. When I joined the project about 2 years ago, I was very relieved that I was able to buy a new calculator in the first place. That was about 3 years ago. So I learned it. I never used a 42, so I learned to do that. But then I read about the forum, and I went to the forum, and I saw that there was a 43 project in 2 incarnations, and I immediately favored the C47, 43 at the time project, because it seemed more natural. I liked the keyboard better. And so I proposed to help. I had some comments, I had some interaction with the developers, and then of course I proposed to make a contribution. And the first thing they asked me is we need someone for the documentation. You probably know what happens when a bunch of developers get going. They don't document anything at all, nothing. And that's hard, because even when you have 100 settings, how will you tell the user what to do, what's even possible? So that was my starting point. And one of the things, that's just an example of how we do the discussions about design or style, is about the menu system. This is a family of menus, we call it 10 menus. It's about interacting with trailing input. If you store a value in a register, you get a trailing input to select the right register. We have various variations of that, and there's a whole family of menus involved with that. I'm just showing them because they are all alike, so the same kind of things are in the same location in the menus, and other things which are clearly different are clearly marked as such by being in another location, other function, other location. And one of the things I try to do is to formulate some principles, because of those discussions which are always very, almost emotional. So how do you deal with it? Who wins? Who wins the discussion? And that has to be based on some other things than who shouts the loudest, or who has the most history in the project. So we try to formulate principles like, can I explain the layout of this menu? Or is it familiar to me? Or even something hard to describe as a rhythm. Because sometimes I make a proposal for a layout, it's also my job. And it looks good on paper, but it doesn't work right when you use it. That's something we call rhythm. And some other very more fixed principles, like we have radio buttons and checkboxes like any normal user interface, graphical user interface. But because of the limitations of the physical screen, we have to be careful to separate groups of radio buttons which do not belong together, because that would be confusing. And there are lots of these principles. In practice, we don't look up the principles anymore. We just try to apply them. But it's one of the things that we do all the time, looking at whether our choices are not natural, can be explained, are useful. Just one of the principles. But it's a big part of how the calculator feels in actual use. So let's get back to the main part of what I would want to tell. Is How do you document a calculator like a modern C47? One of the things we haven't gone into a lot is that we have several layouts. We had an original 43 layout, the C43 layout, which is based on the 42. But we also have various experimental layouts, just to see what would work. Not only the R, which is now the most prominent, but also all kinds of other variations. How do you document that? You don't want to do it for every variation in a separate way. Also, we have a simulator. Maybe we'll get to showing that, but the simulator will be controlled from a PC keyboard. Well, we have a Swiss user, a Swiss developer, we have a French developer, we have Dutch, which are myself, international. All the keyboards are different, so the keys are in different locations. How do you accommodate that? And then we have all the settings. So what is the default? It may change. And then you want the documentation to reflect the right defaults, of course. There's only one answer, of course. It's a bit of a pity that it's not readable, but I decided to use a spreadsheet to do this. In fact, a database. I used to be a database developer, so try to do it in a very disciplined way. But still, the end result is a spreadsheet with more than 1 million cells filled with data and more than 800,000 formulas. You have to be careful, and I'm the only one changing the contents, but it's extremely powerful. And this is about half of what it's structured like. I will not explain everything. Of course, we will take all day. But the most important part of the database is, of course, a list of items. One of the first things I learned about the project is that, fortunately, the way the software is organized is based on a list of internal names, which are almost like code names, which won't change. But the label, the way they are presented on the screen may change. We may have a better idea about how to call the function, but that's not changing the internal name. So that's, of course, the list of items which is central to the database, which we are using. And then again, we have also a definition of all the menus, which relate to the items, of course. And then we have a definition of the keyboards. And that's just part of the flexibility that's in there. Now we try to do that in a very disciplined way, as I said. So with a lot of attributes per item. And the net result is that you can do all kinds of things. Because spreadsheet may seem boring to a lot of people, but you can still do quite beautiful things, if I may say so. Some of them look maybe quite boring, but other things are more colorful and more interesting. And we produced about, I think, 400 pages of documentation now from the same spreadsheet. So if I change one name on one place, it will be reflected in all the documentation, of course. Here are some of the examples of our documentation. This is the main part. I think the most important thing is what is where, what function is where on the keyboard. But this is not done manually. It's all generated from the central list of items and keyboard definitions. And if I change just the variable which says which layout am I using, everything will change here automatically. This is the way the menus are documented. All these things are, of course, directly linked to the list of items, and we add additional information to explain the use. What we don't have yet is a more tutorial-like documentation. This is all reference documentation. That was the first need. And we are now looking for ways to make real tutorial-like or user manuals-like documents. And we get some help from the user community doing that. That's a great thing. We use a wiki, for instance. But we want to take next steps. That's not decided yet. This is another example. We have a catalog like the HP41 used to have, and it's larger, of course. It looks better. And the way the information is ordered is maybe a bit hard to see, but I have replicated in documentation. You can look it up. You can, for every item that you will find here, you will find all the relevant information in a separate report. This is This is a very recent report out of the database. This is a normal international keyboard with all the keys where they are expected to be, and this diagram shows what shortcuts are available for the simulator. And the way they are shown is that the corresponding shifted function or primary function of the calculator, for instance, F shifted or G shifted function is, well, let's say, convert to polar notation is uppercase P on the keyboard. And that works really well. And of course, we have lots of variation of this diagram for the various layouts, for the various international keyboards. And that has really helped us. Maybe I can add the interesting fact that I had a very different idea of how to document this. And I had an interesting diagram which I found very useful, but I was the only one. So in the end I had to drop it. I really deleted it from documentation because I will never convince others of my way of thinking. This came out of that. It's far stronger, and it allowed us to add a lot of shortcuts as well, because we didn't think of that before. And the diagram helped us to think that way. Now, this is maybe the most boring, but also one of the most useful reports, and that's the full index. Well, I invite you to try to think of a way to use an Excel spreadsheet, which is in fact a limited database, to do a kind of reverse lookup to make a presentation of what is where and be complete about it. But I think we managed to do that. Now, the last part of the documentation of the effort is to tell you that it's more than just documenting. There's also an interaction between the design, as I try to explain about what should go where, the development team, and the actual documentation. I have four examples, and I will go into them briefly. First thing is, how do you support the discussion about new layouts? We made a simple, also Excel-based tool, and I supported the team because some of us are not so graphically oriented, and they want to do all the discussions in our discussion system by text. If some of our developers said, "Oh well, I want roll down to move 2 to the left and 1 up," no one can imagine how that looks. And also don't want to spoil the existing documentation, so made a separate tool. And I was able in seconds to change the layout, and follow the discussion, show a new picture every time. And also this helps to, when it's definitive, I import it into the documentation, and we have the agreed layout immediately. Another one is menu redesign. There's a lot of philosophy involved. We do that normally by just putting it in Excel without anything behind it, just text. And once we agree, I put it into the documentation. I press one button, and Jaco can import it into the code base. There will be no difference.
I want to interrupt there.
Yeah.
Robert, I just want to mention how important that very last fact is.
Yeah.
He creates a layout arbitrarily, he presses a button, this goes, and it gives me code which I copy and paste and put into the actual compiler. No changes. You run it, and the hardware looks like that. That's extremely powerful and a concept, and I wanted just to reinforce what you said there, because I don't think you said it strong enough.
I see.
Because I don't know of another documentation system that actually can talk to the code, and that's very powerful.
That's what happens here.
You did that
That's
very
a
well.
question. When did the idea first come to you? To actually have the the actual documentation being also the driver for the actual code generation? Because that's not typical.
No, it isn't. Well, the original idea, I'm also a long time Mac user, and I've studied the development at the beginning as a young student. And I read about the going hand in hand of documentation and development. So it was something that occurred as naturally to me.
Okay, cool.
And I think it was the way that when you developed at Apple, they couldn't describe the function correctly or easily, and they had to change the function because it wasn't designed correctly. Some of the thinking behind that was what inspired me to propose things like this. That's why documentation design and development can go hand in hand if you do it correctly, if you listen to each other. And this was easy because it's also structured. It's almost like code itself. Another recent question was for the simulator. What's meant for the simulator? We wanted to add a layer of a character layer to the simulator functions to make it easier to using the simulator to enter Greek characters, which can be used for instance in equations. But we didn't really know what characters were already used in various commands and functions. And how do you find that out? Well, it's easy if you have a database. It was even relatively trivial to do in Excel. This is an example how that looked like. What came out of it was just a simple list of characters. The end of it was we will support the whole alphabet. And the last one is going further upon the design consideration for the menus. One of our developers was deep into improving this, and it was easy for me to describe the layout, the navigation, the workflow for the menus as it was, which seemed incorrect, which is expressed by the red lines in this diagram. I based it upon the documentation itself, and I proposed how it would have to look like the green workflow. I think it was implemented the same day.
Yep.
But that was very effective as well. Yes, that concludes our talk. We have a lot more to tell about, but it's enough, I think. And I'd like to invite you to ask more questions, if there are any.
The catalogue is the help for the functions and the items in the catalogue on the calculator?
No, not yet. But
right.
that's one
Have you
thing
got
we've
enough
been
room?
discussing.
Yeah.
And we had some contact with Christophe de Dinichet, who was the developer of the DB48X, the RPL version. He offered to assist in the way, because he has that on his calculator. And the DM42 has it too, of course. It would be relatively easy, but we haven't come around to finding a way to do that yet.
And you've got enough room in the flash too?
Yes, we would have, yes. That's an interesting suggestion. Another one would be maybe to develop an app, especially for documentation. Why not?
Because the data is already in the database.
Of course,
Yeah.
it's structured and you can select anything you want from it. Yeah.
So we were on that question. We've literally considered, because he's got one-liners for each function, not a full function, so not a full description. So there's a one-liner for each function. So it's a fairly easy thing to manipulate that data into being online help for that particular function. But you know, don't do these things in a rush because you let over yourself. The data is there, the need is there. We'll get there.
And we have real jobs as well. So it's time is not unlimited. Yeah.
Very good.
Well, thank you.
You talked about the Greek alphabet.
Yes.
But if you want to use non-standard characters in, say, a variable name, what provision do you have? Do you have just English standard?
No, that's something that we inherited from the other calculator. In fact, we have alpha menus. We have a number of alphabetic menus for international characters, for instance, accented characters for every European language imaginable. We have for mathematical symbols and special symbols, miscellaneous symbols, and also for the Greek alphabet. So there's always a way to
if
go.
you want to put a Danish O with a stroke through it,
That's easy.
that's easy.
Yeah.
That's available, is it?
It's available, and it can be even be more available if you use a Danish keyboard, if we decide to support that.
Okay. You don't really mean every European language. I'm sure you haven't got Armenian alphabet.
No. That's if you consider that European,
Yes.
Latin. I mean, yeah, Latin.
Well, okay, right, yes. So, for example, Icelandic characters. Would be
For
nice.
instance, yes.
Okay, great.
I think most of them will be supported. And one of the things is we don't have the dogma that everything can be in one place only.
No.
So it can be in several menus, even if it's already on the keyboard. And that's something that makes it easier for the user, I think.
Okay, so you've got Greek and you've got Latin. You won't have Armenian, but will you have Cyrillic, for example?
We don't have that at the moment, no. I'm not sure whether it would be possible, because we base ourselves on a font, which has to support it.
Look, all of that is possible, but there's no need for it at the moment because there's nobody asking for it. And if one person asks for it, I might say interesting.
Yeah.
10 persons ask for it. It becomes interesting, and then obviously the next question is there anybody? Is such a person willing to help?
Sure.
In other words, we are a bunch of volunteers, and we do a good job of that being volunteers. But there's always room for more volunteers. So in other words, if you come to us and say, look, here's your font, we've taken all the Cyrillic names or characters into a font, then there's enough space in the calculator to actually support that. Is there enough space in my calendar to actually work that in?
Yes.
That's another question, because my calendar is full in trying to get the math functions not to clash with one another.
The important thing is what you've said. Nobody has asked for it. You don't have loads and loads of Serbian or Bulgarian people wanting it.
Yeah, we have. If I gauge by the number of people that have bought the bezels, because I have a full database of whoever
So that's a
bought
good
them.
learning curve.
I have zero forget the word Russian, zero Cyrillic speaking or writing customers.
Okay.
I have literally, I think there's one Serbian, I have literally one Japanese, 2 Chinese, 0 Indian. I've got a whole number of Indian-looking names residing in the US.
Yes.
That we have. So we have no indication that they actually are capable of using the fully fledged Indian numerical formatting which I have implemented.
Oh yeah, that's very interesting.
I've no inclination to know whether they're actually using it or not. But it is the only calculator that actually can do the 0000 notation in their presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I did that just because of the mathematical challenge of actually doing it. And I actually at the time on the forum said that I won't do it because of the risk of doing it, getting it wrong. But that actually just fired up my curiosity of how to do it. So it's there.
So you've done it.
And we do have a bunch of Chinese units. We have an extensive unit conversion system, and we have all kinds of Chinese speed and distance measures. But no Cyrillic yet. No, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's do that.